going to get started with our second series of panels.
So obviously
this first one is education, the next one will be ethics.
So to answer
my
your
name is
question,
Iago
some of the money is coming from donors.
I'm going to be giving the first presentation on the education panel. I'm also serving as the moderator for it, and I'll introduce my co-panelists just before they give their presentation.
Not only is this scholarship for, but it's also by students.
For those who've been attending so far, this morning we got, I
the
think,
fundraising drives and the outreach,
healthy dose of quantitative
students who will directly benefit from these
perspectives
efforts
on these issues.
So the application
not
process
enough
hasn't
for
been
some,
decided yet, but what do
plenty
y'all
for others.
envision this process to be like for students who are seeking out this scholarship?
In our last two panels, we'll be turning, I think, more to kind of qualitative
Mike and I are
reflections,
graduating at the end of this
on some of these issues.
With that in mind, one of our major
much more
goals
part
is to institutionalize the scholarship.
I've loved playing and watching basketball all of my life, and I've long been aware of the ways in which my participation in the sport could be integrated productively with my life off the court.
And so we envision
in recent years, I've been able to incorporate that lifelong love and the integrative impulse accompanying it into my professional activities as a scholar and teacher. This has struck me as a great gift, a life-enhancing opportunity, that I believe should be available to all who share an interest in athletics.
Enhance our sense of pride.
In conceiving the symposium, many of you know, we asked what of value is gained and lost as a result of the current mode of incorporating athletics into the university.
I'm not sure how that would have been.
For this panel, we intended to specify it by asking what of educational value do we gain or lose by that current conformity. That seemingly straightforward question, however, gives rise to many other questions, some of which have already been addressed by previous speakers. What sort of institution are we talking about, or which sports? What do we understand by education? What educationally speaking do we value? And how do we measure those values?
And I think that's what makes
What are the
it
forces
special, that it's
within
forced
and
to
beyond
be
the
inspired
university
students, the first
that
of its
impact our
kind.
ability to function in the service of those values?
I think
And how does our very way of framing these questions shape our ability meaningfully to enhance the educational experiences of our students?
And colleges at this university.
In the face of these complex questions and of regularly surfacing reports of the ways in
Number
which we
two
are
is we
not
believe that so
preserving our
deeply and
students,
so critically in
it can sometimes be tempting simply to yield to what appears to be unchangeable
students
reality,
gave and students
or
were
equally
built
to imagine solutions that
We
ignore
all know that
important
mission
aspects of the
students drive
situation.
discovery, shape innovation,
I'd like to avoid
and
these
their work
temptations
provides
today.
for a stronger and
However,
better
in terms of
tomorrow.
academic
We
experience,
also
I'm a
know that
newcomer to this
extracurricular
arena.
organizations
So I really
are
don't
the
want to
hub,
speak
are the
as though I have a
incubator by which
comprehensive
students so
scholarly
often grow
understanding of all the
develop
issues
that leadership
involved,
necessary to
let alone
change
neat
the course of
practical
our
solutions.
university. So it's
What
so
I do
deeply
have is a
in
particular
line with,
experience
and
as an
it's
educator
inextricably
in the
connected
college
with the
classroom where I
history
have
of
been
this
forced to
university.
engage
Which
with
is
some very
broadcast
concrete
powerful,
manifestations
we know
of
that
these
this
broader
coming
Because it
questions.
doesn't start out
So I'd like to use my time to offer a brief report of that
So
experience.
even me as senior,
At
are there
best,
any
it
reasons
may
why I
illuminate
should be
these
really
questions
excited
from a
about this
useful new
scholarship?
angle.
I'm not even going to be here next year.
At worst, it may appear a case study in all that needs to be
Neither will
changed.
we.
Either way, I've decided sharing the
Right.
experience could be productive.
I think it's the idea that
Now, because I
those
believe
of
that our
us
disciplinary
who have more
backgrounds
yesterdays
shape
and
our views
tomorrows
of
at this
educational
university,
value, I want very briefly to tell you mine.
Right. So the analysis.
I was trained as a literary scholar, which means in my case
So I think
that
it's
I have a
realizing
special
the
interest in
potential of
language
the scholarship
and in
to
story
build on the promise of tomorrow.
and in particular with how they are
And while
shaped
we may
by
not
shape
directly
ideas,
see people
feelings,
receive this fund,
and social practices.
and
it's
all
the
the other
idea
kind
that
of
students will
ambiance that
forever
gives
be
you
In my
better
research
off
and teaching on the
at
culture
game.
of sports,
And because of our
I've
shared
oriented
efforts.
the intellectual
And
tools
at
of
least
my
to me, that's the
discipline
most
toward helping
invaluable,
my
that's the
readers and
most
students
important thing that
understand
can come from this.
and
Regardless
reflect
of whether
critically
we'll see
upon how the
students
language and
funded, regardless
stories
of whether we
that
could
prevail
apply
in the
for this
culture of
fund,
sports
because we
have
might be
taken shape,
graduating or not. I think
how
it's the
and why
idea
we
that
consume
are
and
better,
purvey them,
more inclusive,
and
more
above all,
equitable, more just tomorrow on this campus.
how we may empower ourselves
Yeah, I
to
love
become,
this idea
as
of
Nietzsche
the
put it,
scholarship is for
poets of our
students,
lives.
by students.
How,
What are some
I
ways
mean,
that students
to take
right
a more
now can
active
get
and
involved
creative role
with central
in
student
shaping the
government,
language and
in
stories,
order to
including
support
those
this
pertaining to
scholarship or
sport,
raise money for
that
the
circulate
scholarship as
around
well?
and
Right,
through us.
exactly. Really over
Well,
the
you
top.
can go to
Cultures of
studentlife.umich.edu
which was my
to
first
learn more
effort in
about
this
the
regard,
scholarship.
is an advanced
You can also get
undergraduate
involved and help us
humanities
champion
course with a
around
typical
these efforts
enrollment
by
of around
volunteering.
25.
And so you can come to a mass
Because
meeting,
demand
which
for the
will be
course is high,
October 21st,
and given the way
this Friday,
registration
in
now we get
operates
the
at
very
Michigan with
first-
and
athletes
the
and
Michigan
more
League,
advanced
and
students
also there will be a
having
mass
priority
meeting
in course
October
selection.
26th.
The course
and the
usually has a
Michigan
high
League
percentage of
Association
seniors
meeting.
from a variety of disciplines
And I think it's
and
just
varsity athletes,
stressing the
including members of the
importance
men's
of
varsity
student
basketball
involvement
team.
and how important students will
This
be to our
mix,
efforts.
which is unusual
We're
in
very
a small
proud of our
humanities
progress
class,
thus far, but if we
has everything
so
to do
meet
with
our
the
goals,
challenges and
we begin
opportunities
to
for
have
me as a
this
teacher,
dynamic,
up and funded
as well as for the
fall of
students in the class.
2017.
And these challenges and opportunities, I believe, have a bearing on our topic.
Tomorrow we're going
in some
to see
ways than what you will see in a
engagement
Super Bowl
and as much
today.
involvement
So this
you'll know
begins on the
everybody
first
as
day of
possible.
class.
You'd
When
like
I
to
walk
touch
into the
on
room
so many
and
different
find
ways for students
that
to
I
get
see a
involved.
certain number of
Getting
basketball
involved in our
players
fundraising
whose names I
programs.
usually already know,
It's
Remember the
conducting
things you're looking
outreach,
for.
and a certain number of
organization,
students or
sharing
non-players
your own
whose names I
in the
don't.
visual
which will be
frame,
critical to
what
I'm
advance
certainly
cameras
not
are
proud
doing,
of
what
this
the announcers
perception,
are
but I
doing.
think it is worth
So
reflecting
we're
upon.
And any other
excited
kinds of
To begin with,
things going
it's
on
clear
that
to me
might
that I'm
tend
not
to make
alone.
the event that don't have
Get
anything
The
to
students
do
who aren't
share
basketball
their
players,
story,
including
and work
many
to
who
create
are
a better
athletes in
tomorrow
other
with this
sports,
university.
appear
A
starstruck to
scholarship
varying
for students
degrees.
by students
Somewhat
sounds like a very
disoriented
worthy
by the
investment.
flesh and blood
and it
presence of
sounds
these
like
young
a
men
very
who, until
incredible
now,
initiative
as fans,
that
they've
David and
primarily
Micah have
seen
been
on
working on
television
for a while.
screens
Thank you
or
guys
from
so
the
much for
stands
joining
across
me.
the
Thank
center.
And again, to get more
The basketball
information,
players,
please visit
meanwhile, tend to sit together,
studentlife.umish.edu
as do the athletes from
or
other
attend
sports.
one of the
But
mass
unlike
meetings
those
October
athletes from other
21st
sports,
at
the
5
basketball
p.m.
players
in the
seem
Kalamazoo
shy
room of the
and
league,
almost
or
suspicious,
October
or at least
26th,
cautious.
7 p.m. in the
Perhaps they are
CSD
aware of
chambers.
their
Thanks for
status in
watching.
the
Back
eyes
to
of
you
other
guys.
students. Aware, I mean, that they are, on this campus anyway, public figures who must weigh their words and actions carefully.
Wait, can you
Perhaps
hear
they
that
have
at all?
internalized, or at least sensitive,
Not
to the
really.
common public view that they are somehow not real students. All in all, that first day feels tense to me, fraught with division and a kind of defensive, mutual wariness that strikes me as emblematic, if not symptomatic, of the strain that our model of intercollegiate athletics and the social values it expresses can place on education. For it's not just a matter of a simple, superficial impression. Rather, undergirding that superficial impression, a number of other dichotomous categories are at work. I'm thinking, for example, of how those students, as fans of the players, are consumers in the entertainment industry, and therefore relatively passive, whereas the players in that same industry are producers, and so relatively active. I'm thinking, too, of the presumption that the students at the university are primarily there to do something with their minds, and the basketball players to do something with their bodies.
Extremely important.
Finally, it's difficult and probably undesirable not to notice that the majority of the basketball players are African American, and moreover, that the majority of the African Americans in the class are basketball players, and that the vast majority of the rest of the students are white.
And we hope to do this in conjunction with advocating
In a
for
lecture
student
first
presence on
delivered
the board of
in
regents.
1909, when basketball was really taking off, the American philosopher William James warned against what he called vicious intellectualism, or the abuse of naming. He defined this as the treating of a name as excluding from the fact named what the name's definition fails positively to include. Offering an example of how it works, he said, "You might as well argue that a person whom you have once called an equestrian is thereby forever made unable to walk on his own feet." James is describing, to oversimplify, how we turn partial impressions of things and people into confining pseudo-definitions. So we might as well argue that a person whom we have once seen as a non-basketball player is thereby forever made unable to shoot a ball at a hoop. Or we might as well argue that a person whom we have once seen as a basketball player is thereby forever made unable to write an academic paper or formulate an argument in a class discussion. I think James nicely captures the deforming impact of the way my students and I see at the start of class. We basically strip away from all the students all the capacities and potentials that are not positively included in the labels we've placed on them. I sometimes think of these names or labels as filtering lenses. And whatever change I need as a teacher to make in myself is a change I need to make also for them. One that entails getting my own deforming, reducing lenses off so that I can do all the other things I'm supposed to do as a humanities professor. That is, get them to see that they have lenses too, get them to see where the lenses come from, get them to see the goodness that is obscured by those lenses, and then help them to cultivate and draw forth through the layers of fear and inhibition and shyness, all those abilities, capacities, potentials, and desires that the lenses kept me, and to varying degrees each of them, from seeing, knowing, and acting.
Same angle that the live broadcast showed. And then you would have just shown the end of the game.
A kind of philosophical teammate of James.
Still shot of the scoreboard clock.
Irresistible.
And the announcer
John Dewey.
saying,
who incidentally was teaching philosophy at Michigan around the time that James Naismith was inventing basketball,
from the little you could see, just visually,
argued for the need to come up with a better way of modeling how we know
stood out in
things.
your mind? Yeah.
The problem as he saw it was with what he called, so aptly in this context, the spectator notion of knowledge. In that way of defining knowing, we would be knowers imagine ourselves standing outside the world, passively observing the stuff we would like to know about. The way we might watch and analyze a basketball game on television.
Brought to you by Plymouth.
That stuff becomes a fixed object to us, and we figure that by analyzing it deeply enough, perhaps by running it through some experiments to see how it behaves under different conditions, we will come to know it. Excuse me. Let me return to my class.
Right. There's
Player
not
versus
much
student.
here yet.
Producer versus consumer. Active
I don't know if
versus
they were
passive.
selling jerseys at
Body
that
versus
time. I don't
mind.
think they were.
Black
I
versus
can
white.
tell you
I think it's fair to say that these make a good start on a list of troublesome dichotomies defining intercollegiate athletics. Certainly, but perhaps not only in the revenue-generating sports that we've talked about.
The NFL started selling for kids.
At least that's how economist Roger Knowles seemed to see it when he wrote
uniforms
some time ago
of their favorite
that big-time college athletics were a system
And I grew
whereby
up in Wisconsin,
poor,
so I
primarily
actually
black
remember
students
getting
are
for
used
Christmas one of
to
these
finance the
NFL
educational and
Packers
athletic activities
replica
of wealthy white students.
But that was a new thing
I see
then, so
overcoming
certainly
these
not gonna see
dichotomies
that in the
as they
stands. You
operate
saw
in
kind
all
of
of
a
us in the
homemade
classroom
banner
as one of my
being
primary
dragged
educational
along Green Bay
responsibilities in the
Packers
course.
fans, something like that.
To do so,
other things.
I find useful
It is
Dewey's
the
description of the
president's job
alternative he proposed
to
to
represent
the
all
spectator
students
theory
at the Board of
or
Regents.
notion of knowledge.
And every single meeting that the Board of
The
Regents
self, he
has,
wrote,
the CSU president has an
becomes
allotment of
a
time to
knower
so
in
we
virtue
were
of a
ready to do
distinctive
this.
way
I spoke
of
with Javier
partaking
Bell, who is
in the
current,
course of events.
UC system
The significant
regent as a
distinction,
student.
Dewey said, is
He
no
said that
longer
the only
between the
reason they really have
knower
it is
and the
because
world.
the UC system brings
It is
a
between
lot of
different
people
ways of
Right,
being
so you
in
can see some
and
of the
of
things that
the
will
movement
cue
of
you into
things.
the fact that you
In
should
other
be
words,
excited 'cause
Dewey
it's a big
proposed
event.
valuing knowledge
Yeah.
as a hands-on process of getting mixed up in the things we want to know about.
Yeah,
And I mean
thank
mixed
you.
up in the
That's a
sense
really
of
good point.
involved, but
Like,
also
you are
potentially
seeing the end
confused and
zone
uncertain.
and the field, and yet he is telling
And
you what
recognizing
you're
and
seeing.
reflecting upon the
Right, so
different
it's
ways
clear
we
that
have of
we're in
doing
some
so.
kind of transitional stage.
In
This
that
guy
sense,
probably,
the significant distinctions
was
to be
originally a
explored in
radio
cultures of
broadcast.
basketball
And so he has the
lie
habits
not
of a
between
radio
so-called
broadcast.
players and
That's
so-called
exactly
students,
Evoke the scene
but among the 24 or so different
for
ways of
listeners
being
a way
in
that
and of
television
the movement
broadcaster
of the
doesn't
culture
need
of
to do that.
basketball as it
Right?
unfolds in
So
real
it's a little
time
bit odd.
before our
So
eyes
you have
in
this
our
close
classroom.
photo of the end zone.
It seems obvious to me that facilitating this process of becoming knowers ought to begin with me. That means, first of all, sharing my initial perception with my class. I mean my dichotomous perception, as well as sharing why I believe
Anything
that
else?
perception is something to struggle to overcome. I'm just talking about calling this out in an informal way.
Okay.
I can't help but notice that I've already divided you up
and the
mentally into
jetpack.
ballers and fans, and I assume you see yourselves in the same way from the way you've segregated yourselves physically in the classroom.
Low key.
I hope that through this
But
course we
not
can
in
figure out why we've done
1957.
that,
That's a big
what's
deal.
wrong with
And
it,
it's
and how
part
not to
of
do it in the future.
Trying to create
In doing so, I'm
spectacle.
trying to model for them the kind of
And
openness
spectacle
and
in this
desire
case,
for
like,
integrity that I
I
hope
don't know
they'll
how
be
much
able
you
to
know
achieve
about
in
the
their own
history of
class
the space
participation.
program, but in 1967,
And of course, I'm
we are
also
2
beginning
years
to draw
away from
attention to the
walking on
fact
the
that in this
moon.
particular course,
Okay?
our own attitudes and
And
experiences
how would you like your
are
thoughts?
inseparable
in which the
from the
US has poured
ostensible
a lot of
subject
money
matter of the
into,
class, and that this is a good thing,
space
not a problem.
exploration. And so the
Meanwhile,
jetpack is
I
a
try
way
to
of
create
kind of
conditions in which
signaling
all
that
students
to us
themselves can
and
practice
getting us
fixing what might
excited
be
about
wrong with
that
their
as
way of
well.
seeing.
Okay?
This entails some of the
Our
practices that
investment
most
in the
people
sporting
probably
event,
think
we're
of
Packers fans,
as at
or
least
we're Chiefs
reasonably
fans, or we're
appropriate
just
for a
football
college
fans,
classroom in the humanities,
right? We're already
to the degree that
emotionally
anybody
involved,
thinks that the
and then that
humanities are
emotion
an
kind of
appropriate
gets
thing to have
channeled
happen in a university.
towards this technological
In other words,
spectacle
students
of
read
the
scholarly
guys with the
perspectives,
jetpack. I mean,
listen to
imagine.
lectures,
One day maybe we could
and
all be
participate
going
in
to work
discussions
jetpacks.
about the history of the culture
How
of
great would
basketball
that be? Just
and the
cruising
ways
across
in which
campus.
it has
So
put
that is
lenses in
kinda
front of
what it
our
does.
eyes that lead us to see what we see
Fan
when we
and
walk through the
consumer
classroom door for the
desire
first time.
For
They
what's
also
going
select
on.
from a
What's
menu of
happening.
individual and collaborative assignments,
Let's get
including
to
both
this.
traditional papers and more unconventional tasks,
Better.
to begin to practice doing for themselves what they hopefully are noticing that I, hopefully, am modeling for them. The effort to take the lenses off, exchange them for others, or at least polish them up a bit. In this way, students who are also fans transform themselves into active producers rather than merely passive consumers of the culture of basketball, and in the process, perceive the celebrity athlete in their midst as a peer, a student, a human being, a vulnerable adolescent in transition like themselves. Meanwhile, those so-called basketball players become the students they have always been, challenged to reflect intellectually on what they do and on the broader social and cultural context in which they do it, and to articulate their positions in discussion with classmates or in papers for me. Everyone learns to craft their own story and to respect the story of others. But as indispensable and valuable as these more or less recognizable activities are, they aren't, in my view, the most important way that we in the class become active knowers. I'm pretty sure that nothing we do in cultures of basketball looks less academically rigorous or important than the intra-class 3-on-3 tournament we hold at the end of each semester. That's right.
It's unacceptable that 3.9%.
And yet, if we take seriously Johann Huizinga's argument that play, which he saw as the substrate of all human civilization, is essentially freedom, you might begin to see why I feel that our little tournament embodies, culminates, and eventually supersedes all the traditional-looking academic work that has come before. So that I've come to believe also that perhaps nothing I do as a teacher does more towards realizing my educational goals as a humanities professor. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to quickly summarize how the tournament works.
Who does she play for?
First, the idea comes from the students and is not a course requirement. Second, the students organize the tournament entirely, forming themselves into committees in charge of creating teams and brackets, selecting nicknames, securing a venue, designing logos, printing jerseys, documenting the event, and creating and distributing awards. Third, I play in the tournament. Fourth,
You have 30 seconds, Thomas.
Absolutely.
the U of M basketball players and other, especially large elite athletes who volunteer, are distributed evenly among the 3-member teams. Finally, the tournament is played during our free time after the semester is ended. The tournament takes what we've been doing in the classroom all semester and shows students that the same thing can happen on a basketball court, with our bodies and with fewer words. In that sense, it is, as I sometimes jokingly call it, the laboratory or workshop component of the course. But that's not really right. It's really just an extension of the classroom. We sit at desks, we read books, we write and talk with words, we set picks, we catch bounce passes, we shoot jumpers, we help on defense, and we talk with dunks. At least some people do. We think and act, we cooperate and compete, and then it expresses our newfound overcoming of deficiencies in our perception, our thought, and our practice. It becomes a celebration of humanity, growth, connection, and friendship. So I'd like to conclude by sharing 3 brief anecdotes that I hope will convey what this experience can mean.
We also utilize funds that are not being used efficiently right now with the Detroit Connector to subsidize.
A couple of years ago, I walked into the Central Campus Recreation Building with my teammate, nicknamed Jam, and also known as Jimmy King, sitting here, joining me on the panel today. A member of the famed University of Michigan freshman class of 1991, known as the Fab Five. Jimmy, who had visited the class as a guest lecturer a few weeks before, shook his head and said something along the lines of, "Damn, I haven't been here in like 20 years. We used to have some great games."
I'm sure a lot of you saw this as it unfolded.
Of course,
actually,
the 2 teams Jimmy played on that reached the NCAA championship game have received from the university no official acknowledgement or recognition for their achievement. On the contrary, the banners they earned remain tucked away. A reminder, former President Coleman said, of a shameful period in Michigan history. But walking on campus with Jimmy, it's obvious to me that he is moved in complex ways by the visceral reminder of his college experience. And official disregard notwithstanding, it's also obvious that Jimmy and his teams still mean a great deal to people at the university. At our tournament, he was asked to sign countless autographs. By other students in the CCRB, by parents of my students who were attending the tournament,
right, yeah,
and even by
absolutely.
CCRB
So we're
staff
seeing
members.
the drama and the emotional
He did so not
drama
only
of
patiently,
the
but with
event, right?
enthusiasm, posing for pictures and engaging everyone in conversation.
They demanded
no,
a
right.
50% increase in the tuition used for
Now,
every student.
at a certain point in one of our games that year, Mitch McGarry, at that time a freshman on the U of M team, whose breakout performance that year during the NCAA tournament put him in a position to make a decision during our last week of classes about whether to turn pro or not.
Right, because all those people rushing
Inbounded the ball to his teammate, Lauren
in a
Brandt,
market as well,
who began the semester as a non-player in my eyes, and whom I was
on
guarding.
the wires.
Mitch, guarded by Jimmy, cut around Lauren, who dropped off a little bounce pass to him as he passed her. Jimmy followed Mitch, but was partially screened by Lauren. I remained rooted by age and infirmity to my spot on the floor,
Right.
thus failing to provide help
Other
defense.
things that stood out.
Mitch saw that he'd gained a step on Jimmy along the baseline, went under the basket, and then up for a reverse dunk. Mitch, who had been idolized by his classmates, in turn idolized Jimmy King, proudly telling me later that Jimmy was following him on Twitter,
Right.
and during one game, cutting his hair in the style that Jimmy and his teammates wore back in the early 90s. Mitch, Lauren, and their teammate, tennis player Evan King, went on to win our tournament that year.
So we believe that it's important that all
And the
Right, so
awards
when you're
committee
thinking
named
about
Mitch
values, like
most valuable
sportsmanship,
player.
right, and the traditional
But it wasn't
post-game
just Mitch's time.
handshake.
So we really hope
If
to
you had
hold
seen the
both
very end of
fundamentals
Super Bowl
from
I,
His
what you
teammate,
would have
Lauren,
seen and heard
wrote me
is the
that she'd
commentator
always
saying
loved
with about
basketball,
10 seconds
but
left
for
in the
most of
game,
her
it's a
life, she's been a
25-point game,
spectator.
so the outcome is not in question.
And when she does get to play
They're
at
not even
shooting
gonna
games like
snap the
horse
ball to the
or
last
around the
play.
world.
The announcers
At the end of the tournament,
are now walking
with
over
Lauren
the
beaming,
Packers sideline.
Mitch placed his most valuable player around Lauren's neck, his most valuable player medal
There's no
around Lauren's
cameras
neck.
rushing the field, mobbing Bart Starr.
What did that mean to her?
Packers stars.
Here's what
because
she
they're not
said.
even really stars then.
I
the way
loved
they
that
are
I
now.
didn't feel like
The
I
other
was
thing,
letting
just to
anyone
draw your
down in this
attention
tournament.
I
I could shoot and miss, and that
Thunderbird
was okay.
flyover.
I tried.
Former President Bush
We were in it
doing
together.
a coin toss.
So we
The
think
The
American
last game,
flag on the
Mitch
field,
told me
the
I was
American
clutch.
flags in the
That's right.
stands.
early
The
down.
He
way
also
that,
kept saying that it was the team
football came
and not
in
him,
this period of time to
which
be
I am not so
associated
sure
with
that is
safety,
true, like at all.
right?
But he
And
really
part of
made
what
me at
you
least
are
feel
getting
like the three of us
when
did
you
it
tune
together.
into the Super Bowl is
After
a
the
very
tournament,
strong
Lauren
dose
told me the
of
first thing she
kind
did
of
was call her
American
dad,
patriotism,
who
which
called her
may go
champ,
down easy for you
and
or
Sweet
may
and
not.
Lolo,
That's up to
which
you.
was her
But
official
either
tournament
way,
nickname,
you should
for
notice
3
that that's
days.
actually not part of
That weekend after the
sporting
tournament was over, she went home,
It's
and
part
she
of
and her
the
dad went
spectacle.
down to the park on the corner to shoot hoops.
All right, so I want to go
At the end of the
to this
tournament,
last
after the
little bit,
awards have been
which I
handed
really
out,
hope
after
you can
everyone
do.
has friended each other
So
on Facebook,
Kevin Durant,
we all
NBA
posed for a
player,
class picture.
This past summer,
I'm proud that
was
when
a
I look
free
at that
agent,
picture,
so he
all
could
of us
sign with
squeezed
any
together,
team
sweating and
that could
smiling in our
offer him
brightly
money
colored
legally.
jerseys, with a tournament logo
He
printed
wound
on the
up
front.
leaving the
I
team
really
he'd
have to
been
try
with
hard to
for
pick out the
9
basketball
years,
players in
the
the group.
Oklahoma City Thunder,
I just see
and
Speedy
joining the Golden
and Rat Boy
State
Genius,
Warriors, who, for
Wild
those of
Bill
you
in
who don't
Chicago,
know, had just come
C-Love
off a
and Cage.
historic NBA season in which
well,
they
you
had
get the
beaten
idea.
Durant's team.
Don't get
in
me
the
wrong, I don't imagine that this
for
course is
losing in the
revolutionary
NBA
or
Finals.
earth-shattering,
Already a
or
great
that
team
it by
and
itself
added
solves the significant
another
problems
great
of
player,
our current
Kevin
model
Durant,
of intercollegiate athletics and
So
how
Kevin
they,
Durant is
what
talking
problems
with
they
Bill
pose
Simmons
for
about
educational
this,
values
and they're
at
going to
a
be
place like
referring.
Michigan.
The context
But I do
is
believe quite firmly that it may suggest
6 years
some modest
before,
but concrete
LeBron
paths
James, another great
by
player,
which the
around
incorporation
more
of
or less
college
Durant's
sports
age,
into the
a little bit
university
older,
setting need not come
also
at the
used his
expense
free agency
of what I imagine
to
most
sign
of us
with a
agree
different
should be our
team,
primary
to join a
educational
good
values.
team with very
Respecting
good players.
the full
So,
range of human
ostensibly the same
capacities of
kind
all our
dynamic,
students,
right? So
challenging
Bill
them
Simmons, who,
to
as I
extend
said,
those capacities
became
in all
famous
directions
as the sports
and aiding
guy,
them in doing
a famous Boston sports
However
fan,
we imagine
who began to write
reconfiguring
columns,
intercollegiate
first of all, for
sports,
ESPN,
I for one hold that
then
such
started to
alternative
appear
configurations
on
must
podcasts,
serve these
on
primary
television,
values. Thank you.
was one of the